As momentum continues to grow, just how close are we to UConn to the Big 12? You're Locked On UConn.
You are Locked On UConn, your daily podcast on the UConn Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Before we dive in, I want to take a moment to thank you for your continued support. If you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Get right at the bottom of your screen. Make sure you're doing that on all your favorite audio platforms. Your subscriptions, likes, comments really help us grow and continue to bring you the best UConn content out there. We appreciate each and every one of you for tuning in. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a three-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket for YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Well, we welcome in Ross Dellenger, national college football writer for Yahoo Sports. Let's get Ross in here. Ross, first question for you, as I thank you for joining me. The burning question is, how close of a deal is this from being announced?
Well, as we sit here Monday night, I think the latest step was Big 12 presidents getting a similar presentation that the athletic directors did about a week and a half ago. Kind of a presentation of maybe UConn's value, what they would bring, particulars on the proposal that has been negotiated already. It's been many months of negotiations between the Big 12, I would say that conference officials and UConn administrators for a few months. And it's gotten to the level the last couple of weeks of that in-person presentation happened a week and a half ago to ADs. And like I said, the president's got something similar, I think, on Monday. So now the next step you would think is possibility for a vote of some sort. The Big 12 would need 12 of the 16 members, a supermajority for any expansion. And, that hasn't happened yet. There wasn't a vote. There wasn't expected to be a vote on Monday. But you would think at some point this courtship will, which is now many months old, will end in either a vote for UConn to enter the league or no vote called at all, which would tell you they don't have the votes to have UConn enter the league.
Let me ask you a question on the vote. Because if anyone is a political science major, when they're voting on laws, sometimes they hammer it out all night until they figure it out, or there's deadlines. Is there really a deadline with this? Do you think that there's some members of the Big 12 that are going to try to hold out because they're waiting to see what happens with the ACC, and there's some faction that want UConn badly, and kind of, is there any way to kind of meet in the middle? Is that kind of what we're looking at right now?
I don't know if there's a specific deadline placed on anybody. I'm guessing that UConn would want to know as soon as possible, one way or the other. I'm guessing that Big 12 administrators would want to either, because it's been so many months, get this over with, right? Either one way or the other. But I don't know that there's any set deadline. I think that when you look at, you mentioned the ACC, and that is the uncertainty around the ACC and the uncertainty around future realignment, conference realignment, is something that I think is driving many Big 12 administrators to believe that this is not necessarily the right time to add membership. I think that is one thing. The uncertainty is probably working not in favor of this happening. I think there's a lot of folks that just feel like there's so much murkiness out there, like, let's kind of wait, so to speak. Right. But I don't think there's any deadline. I would guess you would think in the next couple weeks something would have to be decided one way or the other. Either you take a vote in support of it, or you put conversations off and delay it many more months.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's kind of the $1 million question. I think for me, my source was talking about this potentially being imminent. The story broke, yours and others. So we felt kind of vindicated in that respect. But as far as I'm sure you get this too, knowing a story is about to break and chasing down the answers that are about to happen are two different animals. So, we're going to talk about the pros and cons of UConn and the Big 12, the pros and the cons for both UConn and the Big 12 coming up after this. Hey, UConn fans, need a quick pick-me-up to get through your busy day? 5 Hour Energy has to be the go-to. For the past 20 years, people have been using this boost when they need it. Whether you're grabbing a shot at the store or stocking up on multiple packs, it's always within reach. And guess what? Right now, you can snag 20% off your order at 5hourenergy.com with the promo code LOCKEDONCFB. But hurry, this deal is only good until September 30th. Head to 5hourenergy.com. Keep your energy up. All right, we're back on Locked On UConn. We're Ross Dellenger of Yahoo Sports, national college football writer. So you've been talking about this for a long period of time. My question to you is, what are the pros? What would be the pros immediately for the Big 12, if any? Like, I'm curious from your side.
Well, yeah, from the Big 12 side, I think UConn's men's and women's basketball brand is obviously huge. I think you would be absorbing or adding the arguably the best, in the last 20 years, the best basketball brand in college hoops, especially when you combine the two, men and women. I think overall, just the brand. So there's that, and that is important. I think it's important to Brett Yormark, the Big 12 commissioner, because I think he does want to separate the next TV deal. I think he wants to separate football and men's basketball and do 2 separate TV deals, which we've seen before, but it's not often done. And I think adding UConn would certainly add plenty of value to the basketball portion and make it worth it, maybe splitting the two. So there's that part of it. People talk about getting the Northeast quadrant, New York-ish area.
Yeah.
You might grow the brand of the Big 12 up there. That there's a positive or a thought as well. So those are, I would guess, those are the biggest positive. But the basketball brand is probably far and away why you would do this.
What about the thoughts of football thresholds? That's something that I think hasn't really been leaked. I know there's been a few things like attendance, different investments that the athletic department would have to make and the organization would have to make on the UConn side. What does that look like? If there's a delay, if this all happens and there's a delay to 2031, what are the football thresholds that UConn can look to try to kind of create or get to?
Well, I think it's it's all about probably spending. It really goes back to spending a budget and how much you've spent and where your spending ranks among the others in the league. I believe there will be a threshold of you have to start spending X amount on football in order to that would be like kind of the threshold.
Okay.
It's different though, because, well, first of all, I mean, that's under the current proposal, I think is like, I don't remember what the terms are exactly, but it's somewhere in like the mid bottom third or something of the league they have to get to resource wise investment in football. And it's probably based on a percentage maybe of their budget, because obviously the budgets are so different, distribution so different. So I don't know the particulars exactly around that, but it'll be mainly based around how much you're investing, how much you're spending on football. And a lot of leagues with the house settlement, the revenue sharing coming, are discussing putting floors, what they call floors, on spending per sport. So you have to spend X amount at least on this sport in order to continue operating and sanctioning it in the conference. And that would be something, I'm sure, that would happen with within the Big 12 in something UConn would have to do is meet that floor.
Let me ask you a question maybe no one's asked you. If you're UConn, do you do this?
Yeah, that's everybody's chasing the dollars these days, right? And there's there's more money in the Big 12 in the future of the Big 12, just like there's more money in really any Power 4 conference because of the revenue generating giant of football. And you don't have that obviously in the Big East, and you don't have that in the Big East distribution money. You don't have that with the TV money. And so everybody's driving and chasing more money, especially now with the fact that you have to share that money with athletes to be competitive, probably in recruiting and to field a competitive team. So I do understand it from the point of wanting to financially improve your position, and I'm sure that's a big reason that you would do it. But there's another reason here too, and that's there's a lot of big basketball brands in the Big 12. I mean, it's arguably the strongest basketball league in the country, right up there with ACC and Big East. And you look at the Kansas and Houston, and you can see that they were, even of course Arizona. You could see that Baylor. I mean, go on, right? They've got a lot of historically successful programs in those emerging as well. So there's that too, is to join a basketball league that's just as good, if not better, really, than the one you're in.
Yeah, and I mean, this isn't a question. I think this is mostly from the UConn side. I can say that our fans are torn, clearly, and it's a tough pill to swallow. Coming off of a back-to-back national championship, we're kind of taking our ball and going to play in another conference. I think that's what it really boils down to. Is I think people see the immediate success. So there's a question behind this. Try to explain it to wouldn't say irrational, but an emotional UConn fan that's like, I don't want to leave the Big East. I've never been a football fan. Our football team's been up and down. We had a great run in the Big East. We were in the Fiesta Bowl in 2010. So it's been done before. I'll use that in quotes. But long term, why does this make sense? Other than money, why does this make sense?
Well, I mean, long term, in a world where you're sharing revenue with athletes, and so much is being driven by football, you need to position yourself, in a conference, in one of the four conferences that generate and make the football money. That's if you can just position yourself in there, it probably would help in whatever is coming next, because there's going to be something coming next. The revenue share will not stop at this house settlement revenue sharing. There will be, if there's not some major other conference realignment on a national level, where you have the football programs grouped together or something like that, or football gets split out, or you hear the talk of the Super League stuff, athlete employment, collective bargaining. Like, there's going to be something next, and the schools that are involved in that something, it's going to be in order to determine who makes kind of that cut, so to speak. It is going to be driven by football, and it's going to be driven by money. And so I think you talk to any administrator, and they will tell you that if you are not in those top four leagues, and you have a chance to get in those top 4 leagues, you do it.
I don't disagree with you. Well, real quick before we go to the next segment, college football is back. It's not too late to catch up before the season kicks off. As we were just talking about, Big 12, Big 10, ACC, SEC, you can get it all from Locked On, stable of college football experts. Also, you can get it from Ross Dellenger here. What teams will cause chaos in their news conferences? Everything you need to know all in one place. Be sure to follow and subscribe to Locked On College Football podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. When we return, let's get to know the Big 12 a little bit and some of the interesting things that Brett Yormark has been doing for the conference as he tries to add UConn. Coming up after this. Hey, Locked On UConn fans, I want to take a moment to give you a heads up on a brand new mobile game that I think you're going to love as much as I do, Ultimate College Football HC. In this amazing game and simulation, you get to step in the shoes of a head coach and lead your college football program to glory. Can you imagine actually being the head coach of UConn football? From recruiting players and hiring coaching staff to overseeing training camps, handling school scholarships, you control every crucial detail of your program. It's all in your hands. Will you be able to handle the pressure? And here's what I really love about the game. You're responsible for calling offensive plays during the season. Your strategy will not only determine the success of your football team's, season, but will shape the future and legacy of your program. Ultimate College Football Head Coach is completely free, has no ads, and is 100% playable offline. You can play on the go as you want and when you want to. And of course, we have special offer for all of our Locked On UConn fans. Use the promo code LOCKEDONCFB, all caps, inside the game store to receive a free boost to your program. Make sure you set to take advantage of this perk as it will get your teams off to a great start. To download the game, just visit ultimate-cfb.com, ultimate-cfb.com, or look it up on the app stores. Ultimate College Football Head Coach. Check it out. All right, Ross, as we know, or at least maybe some of the audience doesn't know, Brett Yormark is from the Northeast. So I think part of that is, he knows the brand that a basketball program like UConn can bring. And I don't think anyone really would say with a straight face that UConn is ready for any big-time football. But what we will say is that the bones are there to create something. And I think that's where the whole, delay it till 2031 makes sense. So this Big 12 expansion, can you talk to me about some of the interesting things if we end up coming to this conference that we can not look forward to, but what are some things we've heard, even having private equity groups come in that would infuse $50 million per program? Is that something that is imminent, or is that these ideas that Brett Yormark is throwing out there because he's trying to be inventive?
Well, they certainly, Brett Yormark is a New York businessman, and I think a big part of why he was hired is to go out and think innovatively, creatively, and aggressively, and bring Big 12 administrators these type of ideas and concepts. And one of them, as you mentioned, is the dabbling in private equity. Certainly nothing is imminent there. That one is probably behind the other two ideas, which one being UConn expansion, the other being the name change of the conference to All State. So those are I guess you could say the three right now issues kind of going on in the Big 12. They were talking to CVC, private equity company, and the proposal I don't think had the necessary support, and so there's just continuing conversations about that proposal and how it can change, and talks I think with other private equity firms as well. But the Allstate, the talks with Allstate are pretty deep, with Allstate Insurance to change the name to potentially Allstate 12. That is a serious thing, and I think there's a decent chance that it might happen. And then, of course, the third thing is another expansion round, which we saw last year. Of course, they expanded, added the 4 Pac-12 teams. So he is a very aggressive commissioner, and he certainly is doing partly certainly why he was hired is to think a little outside the box and be be aggressive. College athletics continues to evolve from amateur to professional, and it's basically a business, and it's about finding money, especially now with athlete revenue sharing coming. And so that's what he's focused on.
No, absolutely. If you were to put a percentage on this, and we're not going to hold you to it, man. I joke around with people whenever I ask them for stuff like this. At least I won't. I don't know. I can't speak for every fan that watches. But if you were to say this deal is done in a week, just using that as a hypothetical, what's the percentage that UConn is in and this gets announced, or what's the percentage that they get left at the altar, so to speak?
In a week?
Maybe not a week. Just forget the week time. Just in general, like what's your feeling?
Yeah, it's so they need, like I said earlier, they need 12 votes. I think there's a group of administrators that are for this, whether that be 4 of them or 6 of them or 8 of them, somewhere in that realm that they feel strongly that this is the right move. And there's probably a similar amount that are on the fence probably about this.
Okay.
Many that I mentioned earlier probably believe that this is not the right time because of the uncertainty with the ACC and the House settlement situation and all that stuff. And then there's probably a couple that are just a hard no against it happening. So, yeah, it's I wouldn't say right now it's some kind of like coin flip, but votes. We've seen through the course of how these things play out that votes change and can change very quickly. The Big 10 never planned on expanding again, and any thought of it was voted down until Fox came with more money for Washington and Oregon, and it ended up happening. So you never know how these things are going to happen, and things can change, and things are very fluid. And I think things are pretty fluid with this situation. I would gather that this is going to be a situation where in the next week, the percentage is very low for it to happen. And it does feel like something that gets continuously now discussed maybe and potentially pushed a little further, but you never know. And like I said, additional revenue from a network, like any kind of change to a proposal can sway minds.
Yeah, I mean, this is from what I've heard, and this is, you're a professional journalist. I am not a journalist. I admit that readily. But from time to time, people will bring me stories because they think it would be a good segment of the podcast. So when I was brought this story 10 days ago, I was like, yeah, that's a pretty big deal. So we started talking about it. The thing that I've heard is that the votes are there, but you're talking about it could be 8, could be 6, could be 8 that are likely yeses, that are for this. It makes a lot of sense with what I've been told is that there are some that are like based on the initial numbers that they've received in these presentations that they could be swayed. So that's why I feel like these presentations are so important going forward, and we may find out sooner than later. That's my gut feeling, but I really appreciate you coming on and giving us your perspective because you've been all over this for quite some time.
No problem. It's good to be on.
Well, listen, that's another episode of Locked On UConn with Ross Dellenger of Yahoo Sports. Make sure you stay connected. Make sure your toughness meter is always rising. And who knows, maybe the next time we chat, we'll be in the Big 12. But if not, it's always go Huskies. Thanks, Ross.
Yep.